And then we'll start this, not nearly as much history for the Middle English period, and then do Lanval. We'll probably be able to do all of this tonight, I think. So, exam's pretty straightforward. Only answer one of these. Write a 900 to 1100 word, thoughtful, insightful, well-written, free from grammatical, spelling, mechanical errors, essay that argues a strongly worded thesis. Must include a works cited page. Okay? Somebody in my previous class did not include a works cited page, and I said, I'm going a little easy on this first one. It was an automatic D. I didn't read the essay, I just put D on it. After, it'll be an F. Okay? So, grace period if you want. To do the beginning of class on Thursday, March 15th. That's the Thursday after we return from spring break. So, have fun during spring break and then cram like crazy when you get back. Then there's some guidelines to follow. So you've got 5 topics to choose from. I think any one of these should give you plenty of leeway to choose almost any of the works that we've read. Okay? So the theme of exile seemed to fire the imagination of Anglo-Saxon poets. Discuss this theme in 3 Old English poems. That is, how do 3 of the poems that we've read, or 3 of the works that we've read, address this theme? Okay? Include a substantive quotation from 3 of the 5 Old English works we read. Now, go back up to the beginning for a moment, after the bold about when it is due. For purposes of quotations, substantive means in the range of 10 to 10 to 30 words. Yes, Lord, is not a substantive quotation. Okay? Number 2, Tolkien in his essay Beowulf, the Monsters and the Critics says that all Anglo-Saxon literature is about, quote, the death of man in all his works. Argue for or against. Include a substantive quotation from 3 of the 5. Okay? So it's the same kind of thing. You are looking at that idea and arguing for or against it in 3 of the 5 works. I could be wrong here, but I would think naturally, since he said that in the essay on Beowulf, you might want to choose Beowulf for one of those 3 works. Okay? Not saying that you have to. You can. There's Dream of the Rude Wandering Seafarer. I think you can argue it on those. Number 3, the acquisition, use, and or storing of gold treasure is a common trope in Old English literature. What do the poems we've read say about the obtaining, use, and or hoarding of gold treasure? Again, include a substantive quotation, you get the refrain there, 3 of the 5 words. 4, discuss the Lord Thane relationship as it is depicted in Old English poetry. What are the responsibilities each has to the other? How does the relationship affect the community? What are the positives and negatives, etc.? And then lastly, discuss the theme of impermanence, the transitory nature of everything under the sun in Old English. That's a little different than the one about Tolkien. Tolkien's about the death of man in all his works. This one's about everything decays, which is why I gave for the sample topic, sorry, that should be number 5, entropy in Anglo-Saxon literature. Okay? So, there's that. There it is. So, today we start Middle English, even though Marie de France did not write in Middle English. Okay? She didn't write in Middle English. She wrote in Breton, French, essentially. A variety, a dialect of French. But she's in the Middle English period, and she's writing, we're almost positive, for the English court. Okay? So let's back up and just go over some dates and people and such. 1066, we've already discussed, till that horse was not only dead but skinless. The Norman conquest begins, the year begins, January 1st, death of Edward the Confessor. January 4th, Harold Godwinson elected king. Later on in March, Duke William of Normandy hears about it, gets upset, sends an army. October 14th, 1066, the Norman conquest, Harold Godwinson is killed. Christmas Day, 1066, William of Normandy is crowned king. Okay? Just because he's crowned king on Christmas Day doesn't mean everybody goes, well, okay, he's king then. He has to cement that kingship. That is, there are people outside of London who don't agree to him being king. And so he starts fighting battles throughout England because he's only essentially subdued the very small southeast portion. Okay? So one of the things that William does is as he marches through England, he begins construction of castles. Okay? You can go to various places throughout England today and see not the original castles William had built, but the remains of parts of them. For example, if you go to Warwick Castle in Warwickshire, big massive castle, the only part that remains that dates from William the Conqueror's time is a big mound. And it was part of the original castle that he built, because the original castle was essentially an earthwork. Okay? A big berm of dirt around a wooden fort that then, over a period of decades, gets built upon with stone and such. Okay? One of the more famous things that William is responsible for that does survive is the White Tower of the Tower of London. It's the tower where the crown jewels are kept. And it's literally white stone. It's not that big. Okay? But everything outside the White Tower, that all gets added to the Tower of London later. Okay? So that's all 1066. He dies, one of his sons becomes king, Rufus, I think it is. He dies, then there's a little period of civil war between another one of his sons and, I don't remember Matilda's relation, wife, son's wife, something like that. And then in the mid-12th century, Henry becomes king. He's like a grandson of William the Conqueror. He becomes king in 1154. He rules till 1189. In 1152, Henry married Eleanor of Aquitaine. She's French. Guess what? Henry's French too, even though he's king of England. He spoke French. He did not speak English. Okay? The first of what are called the Plantagenets, and I want to say Henry's the first Plantagenet, but I may be wrong there. But the first of the Plantagenet kings, which are the medieval kings, the Middle English kings of England, who grew up speaking English, is King Henry V. He's not born till the end, towards the end, of the 14th century, the 1360s. Okay? He grew up speaking English. All the previous kings before him did not grow up speaking English. Some of them could not speak English at all. Okay? We do know some understood English because we have accounts of them having conversations with people where they are speaking French and somebody speaks in English and they reply in French. Okay, so they understand English, but they don't speak it. And I'm going to come to what this means in a second. So Henry II marries Eleanor of Aquitaine. Why are they important? Because it's under that period of kingship, and primarily under Eleanor's patronage, that we get the courtly love tradition begin in England. Okay? So what's the courtly love tradition? Well, that's, like 3 or 4 class periods. Courtly love tradition in a nutshell. There's a whole list of rules of the courtly love tradition. You can get online. I'll post it to.
I think you're supposed to start with giving her a letter that says, "Do you like me? Yes, no, maybe."
Well, no, not quite, but it's somewhat related to that. At its heart, at the very center of the courtly love tradition is adulterous love. Adultery. How so? Well, Because in the courtly love tradition, first of all, the woman, the object of a male's love, is always already married. That's not what I was going to say, but it's true. She is already married. She's also on a pedestal. Or as I've had students spell this before,
Oh no.
a pedal stool.
Oh my God.
Yes, I have literally seen that probably half a dozen times. A pedal stool. She's on a pedestal. What does that mean? She's like a goddess. Okay. Why? Because this is the feudal period. What the man does who loves the lady, and the lady isn't just, I don't mean to cast any aspersions on any of you ladies, but it's not one of you. It is the lady of the castle. Like the mini queen, like a mini queen, okay? She is the Lord's wife. And the men who would love her would be the Lord's men. Think of his thanes in the Anglo-Saxon tradition. In the Middle English tradition, it's his, to use Monty Python, his Knights, his knights. Okay? So, a knight falls in love with his lady. What does he do? Does he just go, hey baby, let's you and I do? No, he doesn't do that. Okay? They use signals to kind of indicate, or he does to her, but she then usually requires something of him. Do something. Prove it. And in the literary tradition, what does he do? Well, you go kill a dragon. You go kill an ogre. You go fight a war. You go defeat somebody or something. You go get me something. Okay? That's one way to do it. Okay? But bear in mind, she's already married. Okay? And it's not the kind of thing where the knight just kind of goes, yeah, I know what's going on. Wink, wink. And there's even a lot of debate as to whether or not the courtly love tradition was real in reality, or is it all entirely fictitious? Okay? Though we do know of some real, actual, literal, adulterous love affairs between knights and the knight's lord's lady. Christian?
So it's kind of like that trope that you see in a lot of fairy tale or even movies in which you have the character, here's the queen or someone who's high up, and he has to go do some heroic act, and once he proves that, then she's like, oh, okay, now I'm her. Is that what this is going for? Like,
Kind of.
and when you first wrote, I just have to say this. I thought you wrote Courtney Love up there first. I was like,
I thought so too.
No, it's not Courtney Love. That has nothing to do with
That would be
Kurt Cobain, Though, every now and then, yeah.
No, is it like in courtly love they don't necessarily physically get together, or?
Sometimes they don't. Okay. I mean, within the literary tradition, they often do. I mean, who are the two greatest examples of the courtly love tradition? Lancelot and Guinevere, and older than that. No. No, not Robin Hood. Tristan and Isolde.
Oh.
And Tristan and Isolde is actually, I would argue, the much better courtly love tradition. Why? Because in the Tristan and Isolde story, Tristan and Isolde love each other first. Okay? That is, Tristan goes over, or in some versions of the story, at least, Tristan is shipwrecked. Isolde nurses him back to health. Okay? They fall madly in love. He goes back home. Okay? King Mark then sends him to King Lot to make the marriage proposal to King Lot's daughter, who turns out to be Isolde. So here's this guy who's madly in love with this girl, and he's got to essentially woo her, Cyrano de Bergerac kind of stuff, for his lord. Well, that's really sucks, because he is all tied up with her, not literally, but he can't, do anything, okay? And that's where the problem comes in. So it's adulterous, but then you have all of these, as I said, rules of love. There's a list of 100 of them. It's from this tradition that we still have some of our tropes of what are called love sickness. Okay? We see it in Hamlet. If you saw Hamlet, you saw it in Hamlet. The scene where Ophelia tells Polonius about what Hamlet did when she told him, because Polonius told her to, break off all contact. If you have any favors of his, return them. And what did Hamlet do? He held her by the hand and did what? Why? Because he was so madly in love. He came in how, she tells him. His doublet untied, his garter or hose unbuckled. That is, his socks are drooping. His shirt's unbuttoned. Okay. His cuffs are not neatly arranged. If he had a hat on, it would be kind of drooping. Today we would say jauntily to the side. He's not properly dressed. Well, not properly dressing oneself is a dead giveaway for being in love. Why? Because you no longer care for social conventions when you're madly in love. Madly in love, what do you say about what other people think? I don't care what other people, because I'm in love, and I'm going to live on love, and I don't need a bank account or rent or, etc. Okay? That's all part of it. Now, some of this comes out of a person we'll talk more with the Renaissance, Petrarch. Okay? 13th century Italian writer, creator of sonnets, who is married but falls in love with another woman that he sees one day whose name is Laura. And he starts writing sonnets to her. Sonnet. All a sonnet, the word means is little love song. So he writes these little love songs to her. All right? And in those love songs, he creates the conventions of later love poetry. Now, some of these conventions are partly in the courtly love tradition, but some of them are later, such as constantly sighing and having your sighs described as hurricanes. Constantly weeping and having your weeping described as flooding the world, okay? But, again, at its heart, it's adulterous. Okay? A lot of people used to think, courtly love, man, that's a great Christian No, it's just the opposite. In all the great courtly love literature, what usually happens to society? Because, you all mentioned Lancelot and Guinevere. What happens to Arthur? Dies. What happened to Lancelot and Guinevere? Guinevere, as Hamlet tells Ophelia, goes off to a nunnery, dies in a convent. Lancelot goes off to a men's monastery, essentially. In some versions of the tale, others he dies in battle. Okay? So, all that begins, she, Eleanor of Aquitaine, set up a temple of love. Where you had priests of love. Yeah, it's pretty weird. Playboy, no, not really playboyish, but Hugh Hefner would kind of be, high priest of love. Well, it wouldn't be love. She had, in the court, a man named Andreas, I think I'm misspelling his last name, Capellanus. Andreas Capellanus, okay? He translated a book from Latin. Ovid's Ars Amatoria. Anybody know what that means? Art of love. The art of love. Apparently, however, Capellanus didn't understand something about Ovid. What kind of writer was Ovid? Any of you know?
Well, I know he was Roman.
Okay, other than Roman? Yes, he was a satirist.
Oh.
If he were writing today, he'd be writing for The Onion or Saturday Night Live, even though Saturday Night Live's satire is horrible. Onion's still pretty good. Or check out the Babylon Bee if you're, that's another really good one, okay? So, the Art of Love, in the Art of Love, what Ovid's doing is he's describing essentially to dirty old men how to get beautiful young women in bed. And he's got rules to follow, okay? But he's being satirical. Why? Because he's writing about the decadence of Roman society. He's essentially, what the hell? He's talking about the Hollywoodification of Rome. I mean, we think Me Too is only today? No. Rome had it in spades on us. Though we're fast outdoing Rome in terms of, Rome's decadence and such. So, the rules for love and everything that Ovid creates, they're satirical. They're meant to hold up a mirror to society and say, don't, DDSS, don't do stupid. Okay? Capellanus didn't realize that. He thought he found the gospel of love.
Oh no.
Okay? And so translates the rules. That's where we get our rules. Okay? That's where we get kind of the priests of love and such, so to speak. So it's beginning in this period that we start to have love as an idea enter quote-unquote English literature. Anglo-Saxons did not write about love. Love was not a literary idea at all. Maybe it's because they were too worried about surviving. Okay? Christian.
So a bit like a precursor to like Jonathan Swift type satire, because I don't know, if someone took a mom's proposal seriously, I don't know what to say.
Well, Ovid was, yeah. I mean, satire is not new. You had people even before Ovid, you had people in the 2nd century writing satire. 2nd century BC writing satire. Why? Because people do stupid shit. That's why. And some writers said, stop doing that. Just stop. Why? Because you look like a fool. The purpose of satire is to show fools what they look like. Why? Is it to tear them down and destroy them? See, this is why I mentioned Saturday Night Live. All Saturday Night Live is interested in today is destroying people. It's not interested in reformation. The purpose of satire is reformation of character. Show that individual, don't be an ass. Stop it. Stop doing this. Okay? I wish somebody would hold that mirror up to, Hollywood as an example. Anyway, so that's all then. It's in this reign that we get the friendship between Henry and Thomas of Becket. Who is Thomas of Becket? Or Thomas Becket? Archbishop of Canterbury. When was he Archbishop of Canterbury? After Henry appointed him. See, Henry II and Becket were good buddies. And you can watch the film Becket with Peter O'Toole and, is it Richard Burton?
Yes.
Yeah, Peter O'Toole and Richard Burton. And you can also watch the Lion in Winter. I think it's Lion in Winter. With Peter O'Toole again. I think it's Peter O'Toole. And Katharine Hepburn. Katharine Hepburn plays Eleanor of Aquitaine. Okay? Eleanor of Aquitaine was a fearsome woman. Okay, one, she had a lot of kids. That is, future kings. Richard the Lionheart was one of her sons. John was one of her sons. John the First was one of her sons. And she had several others. She also ruled the area of Aquitaine and such. Okay? Anyways, Becket and Henry were friends, drinking buddies, whoring buddies, etc. The Archbishop of Canterbury dies, and because the king is the temporal and spiritual head, kind of, at this time, the king decides he's going to appoint Becket as archbishop. Now, the king at this time does have to get the Pope's approval, but the Pope kind of gives blanket approval to the head of state. All right? So, why does Henry want to make Becket his archbishop? That is the supreme archbishop of England. Well, because the archbishop has taxing authority, for one thing, has a taxing authority, not the secular taxing authority. The archbishop has spiritual authority. The archbishop can put people under the interdict of excommunication. That'll put the fear of God in you, literally. Okay. But Thomas says, don't do this. I don't want to do it. And he begs Henry not to. Why? Because Thomas says, if you make me archbishop, I will be archbishop. In other words, our days of drinking and whoring, no more. You make me archbishop, I'm going to take the job seriously. I am going to be a spiritual person. And part of him saying, I don't want that. I like the drinking and whoring. Let's keep doing this. But he does make him archbishop. And Becket kind of immediately starts acting like an archbishop should. Okay? And he counters the king's authority. He says at times the king is doing wrong things. Okay? So he has to flee because the king's really angry at him. He has to flee. He goes off to the Pope. He asks the Pope, take this from me. The Pope says, nope, you're archbishop. You got to go back. Okay? He goes back. There's a relative period of peace, relative, like short, okay? And then it all starts boiling up again. And in December of 1170, I think it's Christmas Day or the day after Christmas Day, according to anecdotal evidence, Henry in London is on a drunken binge. And he says, drunkenly one evening, will no one rid me of this meddlesome priest? In 3 of his drunken nights, get on horseback, and they ride the 60 miles or so to Canterbury. And on December 28th or 29th of 1170, Becket has heard they're coming. He goes to the cathedral. Okay? Take my Harry Potter course, go to Canterbury. You can go to the exact spot. They go to the cathedral, and Becket is praying at the high altar. I mean, the altar of altars of Canterbury Cathedral. And they kill him right there. So his blood, the altar and everything. Now you go there today, and they've got this god-awful, ugly, modern sculpture to commemorate. It's done with 3 swords that kind of look like a cross, but not really. We don't want to offend people because I guess this is a Christian church and, let's get away from the Christianity. Some weird thing. Anyways, he's killed. Word kind of gets back to Henry, and he's like, I didn't mean it. I wasn't serious. I didn't really want him dead. And he apparently actually is contrite because he and Becket had been good friends. So Henry shows his contrition by going down to Canterbury. He reaches the city walls. He gets off his horse. This is dead of winter, like January. He gets off his horse and he crawls on hands and knees from the city walls to Canterbury Cathedral. This is the king abasing himself to show a mark of contrition. It's not a short distance from the city walls to the cathedral. If I remember correctly, it's a little over a mile.
Oh my gosh, I bet his knees.
So he's doing this, in winter, in the snow, etc. Amelia.
Is that where Shakespeare gets that last scene from Richard II?
Yeah, well, yeah, I kind of think so. In the play Richard II, one of the characters kills the king, Richard II. One of the guards kills the king, Richard II. And he says, well, didn't you hear the king said that he wished somebody would rid him of the former king? The king he had deposed?
Comey used that line, didn't he?
Who?
James Comey, when he was being, the FBI director.
Yeah, I know who he is. I don't.
He said it when he was in the Senate. He said that it seemed to him that Trump was saying, well, nobody rid me of this medals and priest. I was impressed that he knew his English lit.
He is an English major.
Was he really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit of grandstanding there, I would say. But, so this is what happens, all right? He then dies, 1189. His eldest son, Richard I, Coeur de Lion, the heart of the lion, Richard the Lionheart, becomes king in 1189. He rules for 10 years. He dies in 1199. In that this is the same Richard, by the way, in the Robin Hood legends. Okay? No. Portrayed by various people in Hollywood film productions. Various either great English actors or, Sean Connery, who's Scottish, really not good casting there, or Patrick Stewart and such. Everybody thinks, because of the Robin Hood myth, Richard the Lionheart is what kind of king? Great English king. Richard the Lionheart only lived in England as king for 6 months out of the entire 10 years he was king. He was in the Crusades. And that's where he died, in the Crusades. Yet, louder?
Did Henry go to the Crusades as well?
Yeah, Henry went. He went for a couple of reasons, because he is trying to buck up support because the barons are being a little restless, okay, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But you go to Parliament today, go to the Houses of Parliament, and right out in front of the Houses of Parliament, big old brass statue of Richard the Lionheart holding his sword, The guy he didn't speak a lick of English, and he was only there for 6 months, and he wouldn't have liked Parliament, okay? He dies, his brother becomes king. John, as the Disney version calls him, John the Worst. John the First, who is John the Worst, okay? He becomes king, and in 1204, he loses Normandy to the French. Okay, big deal, because where is Normandy? Coast of France, right? So shouldn't it be part of the French lands? Well, no. Why not? Because where does John trace his ancestry? To, as one student I had one year called him, Norman the Conqueror.
I didn't say William the Conqueror, and then I said it.
William the Conqueror. Or Norman the Conqueror, who did the William Conquest, I guess. Norman the Conqueror. To the Norman Conquest. So John traces his line directly back to William the Conqueror. Okay? He loses what? What is Normandy to John then? Ancestral home. Okay, this is huge. When he loses Normandy, that kind of creates a split in the English mentality or the English psyche. The English at that point become fairly strong nationalists. All right, what do I mean by that? Make England great again, That's what's meant by it. How? We're not French. Even though the aristocracy is. Because what happens after 1066? One of the things William spends 20 years doing, he annihilates the English aristocracy. By the end of, when he dies in 1087, there are no longer any English, to use an anachronistic term, later term, nobility. They're all dead. They've been systematically killed. He kills all the English high-ranking families, just wipes them out. Why? He's subduing the people. So when that happens, he starts to import who? Family members and other people from Normandy. So you get an influx of French speakers. Okay? So England is now kind of a bifurcated or dichotomous country where you have French-speaking nobility aristocracy, native English-speaking peasants, because there is no middle class at this point. Middle class doesn't come around till later. Okay? So English down here, that's us. Okay? And French down in Cope, where the administration is. Okay? That period goes on for that kind of situation goes on for close to 200 years. French at top, English at the bottom. Okay? But in that intervening 200 years, we start to see, beginning in the 13th century, okay, this is the beginning of the 13th century, we start to see French nobility learning English. Okay? Now, after the Norman Conquest, you had the English, they would have to start learning some French. Why? Well, you got to be able to speak to your master, if you're a peasant, to the landowner upon whose land you live. Okay? And where there is some trade going on, bars, taverns, various craftsmen, wheelwrights, things like that. You've got to be able to speak with your customers, or at least the emissary of your customers. Okay? So they start learning some French. Prior to this period, you have French words being brought into the English language primarily by the English learning French. Okay? After 1250, what we clearly see is French words being brought into the English language by French speakers who are now learning and speaking more English. If you've ever been to a foreign country and you can speak the foreign language a little bit, what tends to happen if you're speaking that other language? You devolve to your own. When you can't find the word you want to use, boop, there comes the English word. Well, boop, there came the French word. Okay? What this indicates is by 1250, English wins. English has won the linguistic battle for dominance. Okay. Prior to 1250, prior to 1300, Parliament, it's all conducted in Latin and French. I mean, the very word is what? French. Parliament comes from parler. Okay? It's the place of parley or parlay. Okay? And you could go all, Captain Jack and if you want. Okay? Pardon? Okay? So after 1204, he loses Normandy. 1215, the barons force John to sign Magna Carta. Magna Carta, the Great Charter. Well, what does Magna Carta, why do they get him to sign this? What does it give them and take from him?
Land.
No, it doesn't give them land. Louder. Some freedom. How?
Safety, just like the Treaty of Versailles. You have the illusion of not having antagonism anymore.
No, they were still pretty antagonistic to him. Because guess what? They kept reissuing Magna Carta and updating it. I mean, there are, I think, 5 original copies. That is, the very first Magna Carta issued. There are 5 of those that survive. I've seen 2 of them in person. Okay? But it was reissued in 1216. And it gets reissued a whole bunch of times over the next about 40 or 50 years. Okay? Well, what does it guarantee? It guarantees, for example, you have a right to a trial by a jury of your peers. Notice the word there. Your peers. Well, peer is what kind of language? It's nobility. It's peers have a right to trial by jury of other peers. Barons, if they're going to be arrested, get to have other barons sit on the jury that looks at them. Peasants, if they're arrested, what?
Have other peasants.
Have other peasants in the jury. Okay? If you are arrested, you must be charged or let go. Okay? Your property cannot be confiscated by the crown. And various other things that become the basis for our American system of government or our American system of rights. Okay? John did not want to sign this, but they held the upper hand. How? Well, John wanted to go fight wars, for example, against France. Why? He's still burning over this. He wants to get Normandy back. He'd also like, because it's already been lost, he'd also like to get Aquitaine back. Okay? Because Henry II was king of England, and he wasn't king of Aquitaine, but Eleanor was the ruler of Aquitaine. He was king of portions of France. Okay? So John loses a lot of that. He wants to get it back, so he agrees to these. Why? Because the barons are the ones who provide him with troops and funding. Okay? He can't now just tax them willy-nilly. He's got to go to Parliament to raise tax. And Parliament has to meet regularly. Okay, now they could quibble over the definition of regularly, because sometimes Parliament didn't meet in a calendar year. All right. Skip a bit. 14th century comes around. It's in the it's here. It's in the mid 14th century. I don't have it written down. 1340s. The 100 Years' War begins. Who's the 100 Years' War between? England and France, okay? Chaucer is born in the mid 1340s. Your book says 1343. We don't know the exact date when Chaucer was born. Some texts suggest 1346, but we know somewhere in that period, 1343 to 46 or so. Chaucer's born, he dies in 1400. The period roughly 1350 to 1375 is what's called the alliterative revival. Well, what is that? That's this natural organic process in the northwest Midlands of England. Okay? Northwest Midlands, where poets tried to rediscover or reformulate the Anglo-Saxon alliterative tradition. Problem is, they tried to do that without knowing what the Anglo-Saxon alliterative tradition was. They didn't know the rules, in other words. So, what do? They just start alliterating. They're not emphasizing. It's not alliteration on stressed syllables. It's just the same sound being used over and over. That's why Piers Plowman, written in this period, in this area, has that line, in a fair field full of folk found I there. Completely not Anglo-Saxon. Okay? And it gets to a point where it can be really monotonous. How monotonous? Chaucer makes fun of it in the Canterbury Tales. He has a northern speaker, okay, go on about this, and he has another character say, he says, riff, raff, rough, as well as any of them, essentially. Meaning, yeah, I can do alliteration. Problem is, it gets really boring. And there are some works written in this kind of alliterative style that are 10,000 lines long. Beowulf was only 3,182. 10,000 of constant alliteration, okay? But the Pearl Poet, we're going to be reading Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight's written by somebody that's called the Pearl Poet. Why? Because the poem The Pearl is in the same manuscript. He's also called the Gawain Poet. Depends on what you want to call it. There's two other works in that, but again, they're from the Northwest Midlands. Tolkien, in an edition of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, because he was a language scholar, not just Beowulf, Tolkien actually, in his edition, thought he could pinpoint on the basis of dialect that the Gawain poet lived within, I think it was something like a 10-mile radius of the city of Chester. Again, just on the basis of dialect, the use of words. Tolkien wrote a 14th century Middle English dictionary. The guy was an uber word nerd, okay? That's why he writes his own languages. 1450s, over in Germany, 1455, 53, I think is the exact date, Johannes Gutenberg invents the printing press. He invents the European version. Now, there had been movable print in China for a lot longer, but not like the printing press. Okay? 1475 or so, William Caxton brings it over to England. Okay? So that now you don't have to have books copied by hand. Okay? And then this whole period kind of ends in the year 1485. Because in the year 1485, you have the Battle of Bosworth Field, which the location still hasn't been 100% identified, exactly where Bosworth Field was. But the Battle of Bosworth Field is between Richard III and Henry Tudor, a.k.a. Henry VII. It's the battle that Shakespeare famously commemorates by having Richard III at the end of the play cry, "A horse, my kingdom for a horse," and then gets killed. Interestingly, when Henry was killed, when Richard III was killed, Richard said that, not Henry. When Richard said that, or when Richard died, where he was buried was lost. That is, we didn't know where he was buried. Until in, I think this was 2012, just outside Leicester, I think it's Leicester, as they make all these discoveries, builders were building a car park, what we call a parking lot, and because whenever something like that happens in England, you have to have archaeologists on site. Because you scratch the ground and, oh, look, Roman gold, They find the remains of a burial. In fact, they found the remains of a medieval abbey. Okay? And they find this lead casket. Well, in the casket are the remains of a man, and the man had a spine that looked like this. Rather than being nice and straight, he had severe scoliosis. Well, according to Shakespeare, Richard III was a hunchback. Okay. Being a hunchback in Shakespeare's day was an immediate sign, it's like having 666 on your forehead. It was not a good sign. Okay. Most of what, quote unquote, we popularly know about Richard III comes from what source? Shakespeare. Reliable source? No. Why not? Did Shakespeare not know his history? No, he did.
Like care a lot?
It's not that he didn't care. He took artistic license.
Yeah.
Right? He changes events, changes characters. What else, however? Who's he writing for?
The tutor.
He's writing for, when Richard III is written, or under, he's not writing for her, Queen Elizabeth. Well, who's Queen Elizabeth to Richard III?
Well, she was a tutor.
She was a tutor. Her father was Henry VIII, whose father was Henry VII. her grandfather defeated the hunchback. Okay? So, Richard III, the play, to some extent at least, does what? It bolsters, it legitimizes, it toes the Tudor line. Okay? Now, one of the things Henry VII did and Henry VIII did is they had a lot of the stuff that Richard III did destroyed. Why? Because to the victors of war go the spoils. It's the victors who tend to do what?
Make history.
Write the history. Okay? From material that has survived, it appears Richard was a pretty good king, administratively as well as to the people. He didn't severely tax the people. He wasn't the evil person that Shakespeare portrays him as. Okay? At all. There's no indication of that. Anyways, this skeleton was discovered. It was announced and it said, could be Richard III. The guy definitely died in battle because he had a crushed skull, but the person was also suffering from severe scoliosis, so he would have walked like this,
Just like
like a hunchback. And would have only stood, if I remember right, about 5'4". If he didn't have the scoliosis, he would have been about 5'10", 5'11".
so like normal height.
Okay, yeah. Well, lo and behold, DNA testing. Why? Because there are descendants of the Tudors still alive. You just can't kill them, you know. DNA testing proved this actually was Richard III. Lost for 400 years, essentially. 500 years, I guess. And he has since received a royal burial in a cathedral, big monument tomb, the whole shebang, the whole 9 yards. So you can now go visit Richard III's tomb. Okay. Anything else? And this kind of begins. So that, the end of the Middle English period. Henry Tudor kind of inaugurates the beginning of the Renaissance, you could say. It's the Tudor dynasty, the Tudor-Stuart dynasty, which then will go up until the including the Stuarts, 1640s, then you have the little period of interregnum and such. All right, so let's jump to Marie de France. Marie de France, in the 25 minutes or so we have. Marie de France, as I said, you've got a little introduction to her. We don't know a lot about her, okay? One of the better scholars of Marie de France actually used to teach at MTSU in the Department of Foreign Languages. June Hall McCash, or is it Cash Mahal? Can't remember. Used to be in foreign languages. But she writes a series of these works that are called lays. L-A-I-S for the plural, and L-A-I for the singular. Okay? These are one of the genres of medieval literature in England, Breton lays. Okay? They have some very set characteristics. One, there is always an element of magic. Or, if you don't like that word, the supernatural. Okay? There's romance in the modern sense of the word, a love interest. Okay? Or if you want to put, you could say courtly love, maybe. Because I'm going to show or discuss how I don't think Lanval really is a courtly love poem, and we'll see why. It has courtly love elements, but it ultimately goes against the genre. Okay? There is usually some kind of martial component. I mean, after all, we're dealing with knights, so there's got to be some kind of, battle element. Now, the lay that comes before Lanval in here, if you're interested in werewolves, read Bisclavret, because it's about a werewolf. It's a good one, too. So, Lanval. Lanval, Marie de France's version, translated here into English for us, and you get the Breton version in the left-hand columns. This is not a one-off kind of thing. That is, this isn't our only story of Lanval. There are Middle English tales of Lanval, one of them called Sir Lanfal. Okay? Launfall. But they're about the same character, an Arthurian knight. Okay? So we're in the Arthurian tradition. And this begins... I shall tell you the adventure of another lay, just as it happened, made by a very noble vassal in Breton, they call him Lanval. Arthur the valiant courteous was staying at Carlisle, that is in southern Scotland, on account of the Scots and Picts who were ravaging the country. They came into the land of England, repeatedly caused destruction there. Well, look at line 9 in the French. In la terre de l'Ingres. It's not England. If it were England and in the French, it would be Angleterre. That's not what it is. L'Ingres is the old British logres or logres, an ancient Celtic word for the area we call Britain. And in most of the Arthurian myth, this is what Arthur is really king of. It's not England. Why? Because the myth goes back before the arrival of the Anglo-Saxons in terms of this terminology. Okay? So, notice line 11. At Pentecost in the summer, the king was staying there. That is, the king is staying at Carlisle at Pentecost. What does that tell us about Arthur?
He's religious.
He's Christian. He's not just religious. He's Christian. Pentecost is the annual celebration of the descent of the Holy Spirit in the book of Acts and such. Okay? And he does what? He gives gifts to both the counts and noblemen. Now, I didn't mention this. Should have. Which is going to mean we're not going to finish today. We didn't talk about chivalry. Because we have to talk about chivalry. What is chivalry?
The thing the romantic poets made up.
Nope.
The code of the knights.
Code of the Knights, or the knightly code, if you want. Okay? A knightly code. This is a code of behavior. In the Arthurian tradition, especially as Mallory tells us, every year at Pentecost, the knights take what is called the Pentecost Oath. That is, they swear to the chivalric code. Yearly. They redo this. It's like re-upping in the military. Why? It's a reminder. Okay? Well, what's part of the chivalric code? Or what's the essence of the chivalric code? Is it go out and kill as many bad guys as you can?
No.
Nope. It is help the helpless, defend the defenseless, protect and honor women. Okay. Aid the poor, feed the hungry, give water to the thirsty. It's kind of a statement in code for knights of what Jesus talks about in Matthew 25. For those who will enter heaven. Inasmuch as you've done it unto the least of these, okay, you did it to me. It's an embodiment of that. What's at its heart? Service. Humility. Humility is the heart of the chivalric code. You don't do things for yourself. You do things for others. Whether that is defending the defenseless, It's not because it'll look good for you, it's because they're defenseless. Helping women, etc. It includes, for example, not raping women. Shouldn't do that. Okay. Chaucer is going to use that as an example when we get to the Wife of Bath's Tale. Because we have an Arthurian knight who's one day riding out in the forest and he sees a beautiful young woman and he rapes her. And then he goes back to Arthur and Guinevere knows about it and she's like, you're going to pay for this, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. Okay? So, all that is involved when we have Arthur sitting there at Pentecost. Okay? We've got the round table mentioned. He gives rich gifts. Why? Because he's a good kind of Anglo-Saxon king, even though this is after that. He gives gifts to whom? All of his men but one. Why doesn't he give gifts to Lanval? Whom he does not remember, line 19. We're not told. But everybody else gets treasure, but not Lanval. Lanval, however, we're told what about? He's the son of a king, not Arthur, son of a foreign king, of high lineage, 27 and following, but he was far from his heritage, far from home. Okay? Part of the king's household. In line 30, what has Lanval done? Well, he spent all his wealth. Is that why Arthur doesn't give him anything? Because he's a spendthrift? Is he saying, I'm not going to give anything more, you'll just give it all away? For the king gave him nothing, nor did Lanval ask for anything. Okay? Now he's unhappy, sorrowful, and anxious. So, what are we told? Lanval, 40, had served the king so well. Well, one day, because he doesn't have anything, he's not getting goods from the king, what does he do? He gets on his horse and he went off to enjoy himself. He goes out of the town, he goes off to a meadow. Meadow, there's running water, there's a tree. Gets off his horse, ties up his horse, leans down against the tree, and lays down. And he's worried about his difficult situation. Now, little word to the wise. If you ever go in a time machine and go back to the Middle Ages, never, ever, ever get on your horse on a summer day, ride out to a meadow, lie down next to a tree with a babbling brook going by. Louder?
Fairies.
Because the fairies are going to come get you. Inevitably, it happens. That is a common trope in medieval English literature. Okay? So he lay there and he sees two maidens coming. And he'd never seen any more beautiful. Okay, who obviously has he seen prior to these two maidens?
Guinevere?
He's seen Guinevere. What are we usually told about Guinevere? She's beautiful, man. Just drop dead gorgeous. Okay? Well, here come two drop dead gorgeouser women. And they carry basins and towels and such. And they go right down to him. Line 71. Sir Lanval, my lady, who is most noble, wise, and beautiful, sends us for you. Come on, come along. We'll take you there safely. Look, the pavilion is right close by. And he goes with them. Doesn't think about his horse. Why? Is he under a spell and enchantment? Well, in some medieval tales, yes, he would be. He would be under the, let's go ahead and use the word, the glamour. There's a reason why there's a magazine titled Glamour. What does it enable? The idea it conveys is if you follow the advice in this magazine, it will do what? It will enable you to enchant men. Okay? So, they lead him up to the tent. Very beautiful tent. Big tent, gorgeous, huge tent, And we're told this tent is more wealthy than a whole bunch of tents other people have had. And we get mentions of classical figures. Okay? We get the cords, the stakes, all the stuff described. And then we get the lady, line 97. She lay on a very beautiful bed. The sheets were worth a castle. Dang! Like, these sheets are like water, not wet, but so soft and supple. I mean, these are like 18,000 million thread count sheets, okay? And she lay there in nothing but her shift. It's like she's been to Fredericks of Hollywood. Her shift. This is a see-through, like, negligee. Her body was very elegant and comely. She had thrown on for warmth a costly mantle of white ermine lined with Alexandrine silk. What does the white ermine and the Alexandrine silk indicate? Royalty. She's royal. Whatever she is, she's royal. Okay? Her side was entirely uncovered, her face, her neck, and her breast. So, I don't know where she has this white ermine silk thing on her. Because it's feet, maybe. The knight went forward, and the maiden called to him. So he sat beside the bed. She said, Lanval, handsome friend, for you I have come out of my own land. I've come from afar to look for you. If you are valiant and courteous, no emperor, count, or king ever had such joy or good fortune, for I love you more than anything. He looked at her, saw that she was beautiful. Love stings him with a spark that lights and inflames his heart. Yeah, I'll bet other parts were inflamed too. He replies to her and says, Beautiful one, if it pleased you that such joy should come to me, that you should wish to love me, you could command nothing that I would not do to the best of my courtly love. Give me a command, and if it's in my power, I'll do it. Or the implication is, I'll die trying. Okay? Be it folly or wisdom. Now, what has he just sworn to her?
He'll do anything.
This is an oath. So he's bound by this. What if she were to say, okay, I want you to go dethrone Arthur?
Then he'd have to at least try.
Talk about rocking a hard place, because he also has sworn an oath to Arthur.
Oh,
But he's enchanted.
Is he enchanted? Well, I mean, she's pretty hot, so I mean, enchanted that way.
He has a conflict of interest.
Yeah, to put it mildly. To put it very mildly. Okay? I'll do whatever you command. For you, I will give up everyone. Yeah, that does include Arthur. I never wish to part from you. This is what I most desire. In other words, can I stay? It's like, I don't want to go home. Can I just stay here? Even if I can't do it, can I just look at you, When she heard him speak, the one who could love her so well, she grants him her love and her body. So, yeah, you can stay, and more. Now Lanval's on the right path. In other words, way to go, Lanval. The guys in the gym are, She gave him still one more gift. He will never again want for anything, but he will have as much of it as he likes. Let him give and spend generously. She will provide him with enough. Okay. What have we been told about Lanval earlier? He's poor, right? Why?
Because he spent it all.
Is it that he spent it all? He gave it all away. And the king doesn't give him anything. Okay? But, she says, one little caveat. What's the hook? You can't tell anybody. That is one of the central rules of the courtly love tradition. If the knight and the lady agree that she will love him, he can't tell anybody. If you do, you tell anybody, 147, you'll lose me forever if this love were known. You could never see me again. And she probably goes, or touch this. Okay? Or have possession of my body. I mean, Marie is making it very clear this isn't just some kind of platonic. Okay? He goes, don't worry about that. He lay down beside her on the bed. Now Lanval is well lodged. You can read that how you want. He stays there all afternoon until the evening, and she says, "You got to leave now. It's like I'm tired of you. Go away." But go on. But one thing, when you want to talk with me, there's no place. She like clues, what's the word I want? James Taylor, if you need me, I'll be there. Just call out my name and she'll suddenly arrive. Okay? To do what? Line 166 and 7. I will be with you at once to do all your will. No man but you will see me or hear my words. So it's like, no matter where he is, it's like, and she's there. Okay? So he gets up. The maidens put him in new clothes. He goes back home. And I'm going to skip a bunch. 196. He leaves, and several times he looks back. Why does he keep looking back? Was that real? Did that really happen? But then he looks at his clothes, and he realizes, yes, it did. He's greatly troubled. He goes along thinking about his adventure, worrying to himself. He's astonished. He doesn't know what to think. He cannot believe she is true. He comes to his lodging. What does he find? His men are all now finely dressed in the same livery he is dressed in. They've all got on nice, new, Italian suits or something. And that night he keeps a rich table. What does that mean? Doors are open. Come on in. And the food doesn't end. And the wine doesn't run out. No knight in the town who greatly needed a sustenance whom Lanval does not have brought to him and well and richly served. Okay? He freely gives. He gave rich gifts. He ransomed prisoners. He clothed minstrels. He did great honor. No stranger or dear friend whom Lanval would not give. He has great joy and pleasure. Why? Because whenever he wants, he can see his beloved. She's entirely at his command. Which, by the way, I don't know that there's a link here. The theme of, kind of at least, The Wife of Bath's Tale is Guinevere tells that knight who rapes the young maiden, I'll give you a year and a day to answer this question. So you have a year and a day from right now. When you come back, you have to tell me. Anybody know what the question is? There's a movie with Helen Hunt and Mel Gibson. I think it was Mel Gibson. What do women want? That was the question. And he goes off and asks everybody. We'll talk about it later. So, we're told that same year, a bunch of knights go off to enjoy themselves. They're going to go play with swords and stuff. And, Sir Gawain says, well, let's invite Lanval. So they go back to get him. He's persuaded. And the queen, meanwhile, is sitting up in her tower doing what? Looking at the men. Okay? And she has some of her ladies along with her, and they look at the king's household. She looks at Lanval and considered him. In other words, she went, And she sends her maidens down to him. So, Lanval comes up, and what does the queen do? Biblical parallel. She plays Potiphar's wife to his Joseph. If you know the biblical story. She tries to seduce him. We're not going to finish this today, obviously. So she tells him, 263, Lanval, I have honored you greatly and loved you and held you very dear. You can have all my love. So tell me your desire. I am willing to be your lover. You should be delighted with me. Notice the attitude her words betray.
I'm great.
Oh, yes, you, little one, come here. Yes, you may have pleasure with me. That's what she's doing. Notice, you should be delighted with me. And what does he say? Let me be. I have no interest in loving you. fingers on the chalkboard, stylus across the, album. Wrong thing to say. Why? Because one of those laws or rules in the courtly love tradition, you can never deny a lady in such a way that she feels denied. Yeah, thank you, Amelia. It's like, what the hell? How is a man supposed to live in that world? It's because we're going to see Sir Gallen has the same kind of problem. Okay? You can deny a lady, but she can't feel denied. She can't feel rejected. So you got to be pretty good at doing the denying bit. How does he say this? I have no interest in loving you. No. I serve the king. True. I'm going to be faithful to him. True. Never for you or for your love shall I wrong my Lord. Okay. Maybe she could go, all right, I understand. No. She's furious. She goes, oh, I get it. You don't like girls. She accuses him of being homosexual. People told me you have no desire for women. You have shapely young men and take your pleasure with them. Base coward, infamous wretch. I'm going to tell Arthur. Now, this would be the death knell for him. Okay? If she tells Arthur that. And so what does he say? I don't know anything about that. I love and am the beloved one who should be valued more highly than all the women I know. I love someone who's so much higher than you. What's he just done?
Oh, no, he can't.
He broke his oath. He hasn't given her name, but he's talked about her. And he doesn't stop there. And one more thing. Know it well and openly. This is like in your face, queen. Any one of those who serve her, even the poorest maid, is worth more than you, lady queen.
Oh.
In body, in other words, you got a good body, but you're nothing compared to her. Or to her chambermaids. In face, in beauty, all those have to do with what? Physical form. And in manners and goodness. Manners. Courteousness. Where do we get the word courtesy from? It's the manners at court. Okay? So, what does he mean when he says, even the poorest maid? Think of a castle, a palace. Who is the poorest maid? The lowliest person who works there. Chambermaid. Because what does the chambermaid do? Empties the chamber pots. So, even her lowliest woman who handles the pee at night, compared to you, you're nothing. Now, put yourself in one of her shoes. What? She leaves at once. She goes into her chamber, crying. How dare you? She is very upset and angry, so what does she do? She rips her gown and she calls Arthur and says, look what Lanval tried to do. Dirty, rotten, conniving, She says he asked her to be his lover, but she refused him and he insulted her. He said ugly things. Do you think she repeated them? I'm not sure. So, we'll stop here. He gets arrested. And what must he do? Defend himself in court. And how? Habeas corpus. Produce the body. I want to see the lowliest of the low. That looks better than me, has better manners, all that kind of stuff. All right. Have a good break. Don't forget to do the exam when you come back.